But thanks for joining us, and I hope you've had a really good professional care workers week, which is, a step beyond the professional care workers day that we have had, in the past. And I've been involved every single year, and it's so nice to see it grow, and it's so nice to see it be a whole week. And I've really enjoyed seeing what people are putting on social media about how they're sort of celebrating the people that work with and for them. And it's been really, really good to see. So I'm really glad to be here today, and I'm going to be sharing my wellbeing tips that apply for both companies and for individuals. So if you are representing a company here today and you are looking for some ideas of how you can support your staff, then we're going to start off with that. So I'm going to start off with what actually drives workplace well-being. What is it? I think a lot of people kind of hear the word well-being and they think of it as being sort of self-care and yoga, and I'm going to kind of throw all that out the window and give you some really good tips of how you can support and promote well-being in your company, whatever type of company you are. You can see some people are from hospitals, some people are from care homes, perhaps some are home care providers. So it will suit all of those. We're then going to look at how you can put together a wellbeing policy that just kind of backs up any efforts that you put into place, any initiatives that you put into place, and really says we care about wellbeing, and here's our policy that shows that. And I'm going to share just some ideas, going to throw them at you. The first half of this, because I think, and I should have checked this with Emily before I started, but I think this is supposed to be a 30-minute webinar. So I'm going to do my absolute best to stick to time. I'm going to put a timer on right now so that I do. So I'll do my best with that. And then we're going to come on to you. So whether you are on here representing a company, or whether you are on here as somebody who works in the care sector and you want some ideas of how to support your own well-being, I will not be telling you to go and have a bubble bath and put on a face mask. We're going to go a little bit deeper than that. And I want to send you into the weekend with some things that you can really think about, that you can go away and start to go, if I do X, Y, and Z, or if I start to think about these areas, then I can really start to support my own well-being so that you can get the most out of yourself, your life, and the work that you do. At the very end, as I said, I'm going to share some freebies with you, and I'm going to put those in the chat. So just make sure you know where the chat is, and there will just be direct links that you can click through to access some of the freebies. Like I've got a wellbeing policy template that I'm going to share with you at the end. So I've even done half the work for you. So briefly, because I want to get stuck in, who am I? My name's Sophie. I work with a company called Judgment Index, and we support care companies across the UK in the development of their staff. We run leadership academies and all sorts, tons on our website. We give away a lot of free, useful resources. So go and check that out. Last year, we also wrote a book, The Care Leader's Handbook. We are specialists at leadership in care. So that book's on Amazon. But again, you can find more about that on our website too. And then finally, maybe you think, I recognise this girl's voice. I used to host a podcast called The Road to Outstanding that's got 6 series, over 50 episodes, interviews with various people working in various aspects of care. Every single episode is jam-packed full of useful information for you to take away, loads of ideas, and that is available wherever you get your podcast from. So Spotify, Apple, etc. So that's me. I'm going to finish that, and I'll put links to these in at the end as well. So you'll be able to click through to anything that you might want to check out. But let's start with something that you probably all know, that's probably really obvious. I don't really need to spend much time on it, but what does poor staff wellbeing cost to you, to your company? And, if you think about, especially at the moment, people who have probably never struggled with mental health, who have been absolutely, troopers and kind of got on with things for most of their lives, may have had a wobble in the last 6 months, and particularly with everything that the care sector's been dealing with. And I think it's important to think about what happens when you have, let's say, a group of people in your home, or I do say home quite a lot, but within your organisation, a team, individual, or the entire culture of the place is not supporting well-being, think about what that affects in terms of your staff turnover rate, in terms of people going off sick and how much that costs you in agency fees, in terms of the quality of the work that they produce, and kind of the impact that that has on the culture within the home as well. If people are not feeling good in themselves, how does that then sort of ripple out into the entire company? Now, one thing I want to point out right at the start actually is that nothing I'm going to share with you today is going to cost a lot of money, because I think one of the issues that we have within the care sector is that the likelihood is you're not a big corporate company that's got, you know, endless budgets to kind of throw at your staff and spend on luxuries, really, as they might be seen. So everything that I'm going to talk about today is kind of logical, practical, free, or is going to cost you very, very little. So let's get stuck in. And I think the barrier to a lot of people when it comes to thinking about well-being is, where do I start? What do I do? What's actually going to make a difference? And you know, how do I measure this? And I think it's important to think about, is there a framework that we can put around well-being like we do about so many other aspects to care, where you can say, right, I've got to think about this, 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 and this. And that's what we're going to do right now. So a piece of research by a company called A Great Place to Work that was conducted a few years ago found that these were the 4 key drivers of workplace well-being. Workplace, we're not talking about personal as such yet. And I think that these are 4 things that any company can take on board and take steps to do something about it. So we're going to start off with values aligned behaviour. Values is such a buzzword in care. I'm sure you all have company values and you know what they are, but actually, how do those values align with the staff, and how do they reflect how the staff kind of operate and go about their work? And I think this is the key thing. If you have a set of values that the staff aren't on board with, or they don't agree with, or they don't feel like they're being kind of influenced or being reflected, then there's a misalignment there. And we all want to work somewhere where we feel like the company will do the right thing by me, and that the way that I behave, it matches with how the company behaves. And I think right now, I mean, taking a value of, let's say, respect, for example, I'm sure there'll be people, drop it in the chat if respect is one of your company values. But I bet if it is, it's more aimed at respect for the residents or respect for the clients, rather than how can you now take that word respect and make it apply to the people that work there and how they work with each other and how the company respects them and they respect the company. And I think if you can do some work on this, and I'm not going to have time to go through my workshop that I would suggest running, to really work on values aligned behaviour, it can make a huge difference for the well-being of the team, because they are going to come in and they are going to know that the company and them are aligned, and what they do and what they have to do as part of working for the company is what they would do anyway. I hope that makes sense. I have a whole, when I share this information at the end, I have a suggested workshop that you can do with your team to align the values with their behaviour. And it's a really good first step if you're thinking, how can I even start to kick off something about supporting wellbeing? Then that will really, really, really help. Next one, teamwork. Now, I'm sure that all of your staff have to work as teams. This is much more difficult for people who are home workers who provide home care. Then teamwork is a really key part. Most of us, when we leave a job, it's not the job that we're upset about leaving, it's the people that we work with. And you know, we want to be able to work well as a team together. How can you promote this a bit more, especially right now where people have probably had their heads down, they've been working so hard? How can you now bring them together as a team? Are there any projects that they can work on together? Is there anything a bit fun that you can start to put people together and get them involved with? And that, again, is a real driver of well-being. Processes not often thought of, as a driver of well-being. But if you have systems which are broken, or you have processes or protocols which are a bit of a mess, or you've got software that doesn't work properly, or if somebody wants to book a day off, it's a massive hassle because they have to go all around the houses to try and just, take a day off, then that is going to be affecting people, because breaks in processes causes stress and anxiety. And even if that's things like compute, we've only got one computer in a dark room somewhere, and every time we need to do the rotas, we've got to go and sit in this horrible dingy dark room, and it doesn't work, and the internet's slow, etc., etc. By actually taking steps to say, right, we're going to fix some of these things, that is supporting staff well-being, because that's going to make their job easier, and then that's going to be less headache, less stress, less anxiety. So process is a real key one to think about, and something that you can fix generally very quickly. And finally, recognition. And recognition is something that some care companies I see do it amazingly well, and they're doing a person that's being recognized every month, and there's a newsletter, and their name goes up in reception, and there might be a pin board with their photo and some information about them. But also, I think where in care, especially if you're a leader, you're almost trained to be able to spot things that are wrong, because if something's wrong, then that could be a risk to a client. It's almost like we're trained to see the negative sometimes rather than the positive. So how can you incorporate more recognition, especially now? I'm sure I know there'll be all sorts of different stories, and I can't generalize, but I'm sure some of you will have staff that have been working so hard, and how can you recognize them? And a personal thank you, or a written thank you card, or a thank you letter is so often undervalued by the company, but would be massively valued by the person receiving it. So how can you now start to incorporate more recognition? And the one thing that I will stress as well is, can you do anything in terms of peer-to-peer recognition? So it's not coming from you, the leader, let's say, oh, I deem this person to be the employee of the month or the employee of the week. How can you get people to nominate other people? Because when you start to get peer-to-peer recognition, it's actually more powerful and proven to have a more positive effect on people if they're being nominated by a peer. So I hope that gives you some things to think about. What I recommend doing is writing these 4 things. Oh, a golden ticket system. Put some more about that, Maxine. Please explain that in the chat while I carry on. What I suggest you doing, get a piece of paper, cut it into 4, 4 line across the piece of paper, write each of these teamwork processes in each box, and then fill it in with what you're doing already, because I bet you're doing some of this stuff already. And then look at where are the gaps, what could we work on? And if you use this as a framework to start to build a wellbeing plan, some of it will already be done, and it's just about recognizing that you're doing things already, telling the staff what you're doing, because some of them won't perhaps realize we're fixing this computer system and we're getting all this fixed because we know it's going to make your life easier. That is promoting positive well-being. And then the next thing to do is start to bring it all together into a well-being policy. Perfect. So if people can see the chat, Maxine is saying that she knows a company that does a golden ticket system, and they do a ticket that people fill in, and they nominate people every month, and that comes from family as well, which I think is wonderful. And yeah, the key is that it's not being orchestrated by management, it's coming from the people around. So great, really great. How to create a wellbeing policy? Write it down. Put it on paper, make it almost like a mission statement. And if you have a mission statement on your website and you go and read it, I bet it refers to your clients or residents rather than your staff. And that's fine, but think of a wellbeing policy as almost being a mission statement for your staff. use it, promote it, tell people about it during their induction, make sure they hold you accountable for it, put it in your employee handbook and talk about it on social media, because this is also going to help you to attract new people. Because I don't see too many care companies that promote a wellbeing policy and promote what they do to support staff wellbeing. And think about the things that you might do already. I've got some of them listed out there that you can see, and we're going to do some more as well. I've got some simple wellbeing strategies for any care company. Let's run through those quickly, because I want to move on to the stuff which is about you and your own wellbeing, which is what I promised for today to the Care Workers Charity. And the thing is I'm going to share with you very quickly just 3 simple strategies. I've talked about these before. I've got a whole episode of the podcast that I did talking about these, and I will link that at the end. So here's going to be 3 for starters, but if you want the rest of them, I'll link that to you. So create a space that staff can relax when they're on a break or they're having their lunch. I've been into a lot of care homes in particular, and I sometimes find that the only place staff can go to get some sort of peace and quiet and a little break is the smoking shed. And that doesn't really say well-being to me. So how can you create some sort of space that is purely for staff with some magazines, really simple, but how can you just make it a nice place for them to go and chill out when they're on a break? I know this sounds simple, but I just don't see it in a lot of places. If you're a company that provides home care, is there a local cafe that you can almost maybe do a little deal with, so that if people do want to pop in, they might get a little discount, or there might be somewhere where people feel like they can get together, and relax together. This one, again, we're coming back to this peer-to-peer recognition. So thank you, Maxine, in the comments, who's talked about this sort of golden ticket system. This is an alternative idea. They could both be incorporated together. And it originally came from a Swedish company that bought a stuffed elephant. Might not always be so practical in a care setting, but they bought this cuddly toy elephant, and the idea was that one employee would give it to another employee when they'd done something exemplary. So the way you handled that client and their family was just so fantastic, you made them feel so good, here is the elephant. And the idea is that other people within the company spot the elephant and say, oh, you've got the elephant, what did you do? And it encourages storytelling, and it encourages that person to then share what they've done. And again, that then we're sharing the positives, and it's promoting all those kind of feel good well-being feelings as well. So I've talked about this before at various talks, and somebody came back to me and said, we didn't feel like an elephant would work in our care setting, but what we did do was like a badge. So if people have got the badge on, then it shows that someone else has given it to them. And then when they're ready and they see something exemplary, they can give it to the next person. So there we go, an idea to go away and think about. And the last thing that I'm going to share as an idea, and if any of you are using WhatsApp at the moment to have staff communication, that is great, and that's a good start. It's great for getting people to communicate. But I do encourage companies to think about moving to something called Slack, which again is free. It's very similar to WhatsApp, but Slack is geared for work conversations. And my issue with using WhatsApp for work chat is that if you think about who you talk to on WhatsApp, it's probably your friends, it's probably your family, you've probably got a group, of friends and family. And every time you get a work message, it's just interrupting your downtime with work. And it might not sound like a big deal, but it slowly starts to drive anxiety, particularly if you have a very active group chat, let's say on WhatsApp. Try moving to Slack. Somebody came back to me and said that they had done this with their staff. They actually wrote something about it. I think it might have been on Twitter or LinkedIn, or anyway, and they just said what a positive move it was, because it really helped get all the staff in one place. It was work focused. They could share information about about their clients in a protected space, so that if they were changing shifts, people could see what was happening, keep up to date with everything. A really, really positive step for kind of moving work conversations somewhere where they're separate from your personal life. So that's another idea for you there. And there's a few more. I'm going to check the time. There's a few more. Good. I'm fine. I can relax. A few more ideas of things that you can do. Things such as a 1-minute questionnaire every week out to staff, something that they can fill in super quick about how they're feeling. Is there anything that we could do better? Do you like this? What's the problem with this? Anything like that, that's just very quick to keep your finger on the pulse of how your staff are feeling, and particularly right now, can be a really, really good idea. Wellbeing Wednesdays, things like that. Is there a way that you could have a meeting that instead of it being in a dark room sat down, you go for a walk around the garden and you do something like that? So we've got some different ideas here on the screen, but what I want to do now, somebody's sort of written a comment. Here we go. This is the juggle of you trying to manage chat and present and manage the PowerPoint at the same time. So somebody has suggested a care workers app where all your policies, procedures, vacancies and chat in one place. That sounds fantastic. Perfect. Definitely a lot easier then to separate work life and personal life. So thank you for that. Let's move on. And I don't know how many of you here are here because you wanted to learn some tips to support your own well-being rather than the well-being, rather than on a company level. Please let me know if you were here for something for you. But let's talk about you. So I've got about 10 minutes left. And I'm going to take you through just some thoughts and some ideas that you can take away and have a think about over the weekend. Now, as I said, I'm not going to talk about yoga and I'm not going to talk about face masks, but I want to start to think about well-being as being more than that. We can only perform to a level at work if our well-being in ourselves, if our personal well-being is in a good place. Because if it's not, we're just not going to perform at our best in the working world. And that's the fact. Or maybe you'll be able to for so long, but at some point or another, things will start to sort of unravel, let's say. So I'm going to reference some research that we did at the Judgment Index a couple of years ago, where we looked at various aspects of what we call value-based behaviours of people working in care. Obviously, we work with lots and lots of care companies. And what were the key things, what were the key almost development areas for people working in care that were reflected across, all the different demographics that we work in when it comes to care. And there are really 3 that I'm going to pick up on now, that we very, very often see in care companies. 3 different well-being areas, as I like to call them. And the first one I want to talk about is self-esteem and confidence. And we see it time and time again when we go and work with companies and we look at where are their development areas. Self-esteem and confidence is very often, the area that pretty much, the whole company is not as good as it could be. And I'm not going to go sort of big strategic thinking and political on this and talk about why there might be a lower self-esteem and confidence within the care sector and within people that work in the care sector. But I think it's really important to think about yourself right now. Yes, you can think about this on a company level, but have a look at this scale. So on the right hand side in the green, this would be that your self-esteem and your confidence is at a good level, that you feel comfortable in yourself, you're cool in yourself, you're at a place in time where you feel comfortable, you can express yourself. If something goes wrong, it's kind of, it's okay, things will be okay. And you've got a kind of decent amount of confidence and self-assuredness in yourself to kind of get through things and deal with things. Middle of the park, maybe starting to, so let's say we're sort of creeping into this yellowy orange colour, then maybe starting to have a bit of a dip in self-esteem for whatever reason. And I'm going to talk about potential reasons in a second. Or would you say that you're where this, obviously this example is kind of in the red, actually quite low self-esteem, don't feel that great about yourself, don't have a lot of confidence, and wouldn't feel comfortable kind of putting yourself forward for things, or, you know, putting yourself out there. I think it's worth having a think about where you might be on this scale, but I think the most important thing is to think about what the cause is and what the effect of that is. So what is causing poor self-esteem? And very often some kind of personal stress or something that's going on in somebody's personal life can be the main cause of self-esteem, whatever that poor self-esteem, whatever that might be. If there's something blocking confidence, then it can be potentially a lot of self-criticism. So if you're particularly tough on yourself, if you talk negatively to yourself, then that can have a damaging impact on your self-esteem. You know, if you're always saying to yourself, oh, you did that rubbish, and oh, you'll never be good enough at this, then you can imagine what that does to self-confidence. So it's important to think about, is there a cause there? And actually then what effect is it having on me? Is it stopping me from progressing because actually I'd quite like to move up to team leader, or I'd like to be considered for manager, but this is getting in the way? This is a well-being area, and very, very often when we look at well-being areas, and I've got my own venture. So Judgment Index, we look at all aspects of behaviours within care, but I've got my own venture which is just launching now. I'll talk about it at the end. Let's get through the good stuff first. And we are specifically looking at 10 key well-being areas, and this is one of them, and it's very often the weakest one for most people. So what can you do about it? I think it's about thinking about, what are the steps to start to turn this around? If you have an issue with comparing yourself, or constantly looking at people on Instagram or Facebook and thinking they're living a better life than me, or comparing yourself to them, it might be time to delete those apps, or at least disable them, delete them from your phone. You know, what are the actual steps you can take to start to make improvements? And also learn. If you've sat here and looked at this scale and gone, actually, I'm heading down towards the red on this, get yourself on YouTube, go to the library, and look for podcasts. There is so much out there that can support you to start to make that shift. And if you can start to feel differently and you can start to think differently, then that will reflect in your behavior, and that will help you not just in your personal life but in work as well, and it will help you be better in your career. Right, let me not go off too long, because I really want to get through this next bit, and then we're coming to the end as well. So how am I doing for time? I'm going to have to speed right up. Assertiveness, very, very often a poor well-being area for many people in care. So assertiveness is important for people working within care, within many sectors, but within care, because it links so closely to safeguarding, really. If you have staff that aren't comfortable being assertive, that can't state their opinion or express themselves, and maybe speak up if they see something that they're not comfortable with, then that's a risk to your care organisation. And we go into many care companies, and there is a clear development area in assertiveness right across the board. So how can you work on this? And now if we think about you yourself, maybe you've got a little piece of paper that you might be scribbling down, or feel free, if you're open, you can always put it in the chat. But let's have a look at this. If you were on the right hand side in the green, that would mean that you are comfortable asserting yourself. This is about being appropriately assertive. So it's about being able to state your opinion or express how you feel in a respectful way, but not shying away from it. If you need to plant your flag and say how you feel, you're going to do it. And that would be in the green. The complete opposite end of the scale, in the red, would be very, very passive, avoids conflict, doesn't want to make a fuss. If you're not this way, I bet you know someone in your company who is, that wouldn't say boo to a goose, that wouldn't say how they feel, and might feel very uncomfortable disagreeing with someone if they felt like they disagreed. Wouldn't be comfortable doing that. Now, the middle of the park, if you're sort of down the middle of the page, then that you might be someone, and bear in mind, I'm going like one extreme to the other and then in the middle. So there's obviously some grey area in between. But middle of the park would potentially be somebody who, if it's important to them, they might step up. You might step up and plant your flag and say how you feel. But if it's not important, you'll let it go. And that's okay, I think. But if you walk away from a situation, or you leave for work that day and you think, I should have said something, or I wish I'd handled that differently, then there may be some potential development for assertiveness for you there. Can you be both depending on what it is about? Sure. I'm sure that some people will feel more comfortable in their personal life. They'll come home and let their partner have it if they've not cooked the right thing for dinner, but might then feel very uncomfortable asserting themselves in the workplace, or vice versa. I don't know. I'm sure that this can change in different scenarios because it is a behavior. So it can depend. But think about where you are generally on here. Now, the thing about being assertiveness and why assertiveness impacts well-being is because, like I said, if you're walking away from situations and wishing that you'd said something, that's going to have a little effect of maybe eating away at you, maybe causing some anxiety, and that then is going to affect well-being overall at some point down the line. If you can be comfortable asserting yourself, then that can actually help you build trust with others, because if they know that you're going to say how you feel respectfully, and they know that you're going to speak up and express yourself, then they know where they are with you. And that can help build trust in a relationship, or, not necessarily a personal relationship, but with friends, etc. If you're somebody that can say where you want to go for dinner, instead of saying, I don't mind, it actually does make life a lot easier when people are more decisive and more assertive. So think about whether that's something you could work on. And I always say a simple tip for practicing being more assertive is to try it when it's not critical. So, as the example goes, if your partner says to you tonight, what do you want for dinner? Instead of saying, oh, I don't mind, even if you don't mind, say something. I really like Chinese, or I really want to cook for fajitas tonight, or I'd love you to make that pie that you make. By practicing it when it's not critical actually helps you practice the habit for when it does become critical. So a really simple little tip, but again, if it's something you need to work on, get on YouTube, get learning, and think about how that's going to impact your well-being. Last one, I'm going to leave it here after this. And this is something, did we see this in the care sector? The difference between the energy and the strength and the sort of effort that people put in for work and their company and the people that they look after, and essentially all of the energy that they have that goes outwards to others versus the energy that they put back into themselves. And oh man, we see this in the care sector as let's have a look. Think about yourself. Now, what I'd like you to do, if you have got a piece of paper and a pen in front of you, is draw these boxes as I've got them here. There's these two grey boxes stacked on top of each other. Now, this top tier, I want you to fill this up to represent, imagine if it was completely full, it would be 100%. 100% of your energy is going into work. And then fill the bottom tier in as to how much energy is going into yourself. Which one's getting more? More of the, if you were, let's say you had a cup and you were pouring it in, how much is going to external work, others, kids, partner, etc., and how much is coming back into you? So if you start to scribble that in, here's a little bit of an example here. Where is it going? The top half is work, the bottom half is yourself. Now, what I want you to do as you look at this, and what I will say is that most people, when they do this exercise, it does not look like how I've drawn it on screen. It will look as pretty full in the top and not that full at all in the bottom. And I want you to now imagine that these two tiers are actually a two-tiered wedding cake. I know you're probably thinking, what is she going on about on a Friday afternoon? But imagine if it's a wedding cake. Now, an ideal wedding cake, as we like to look at one, or any two-tiered cake, would look more like this that's on the screen now. So the top tier is, you know, whatever width it is, but the bottom tier is bigger. And the reason why the bottom tier is bigger is because it supports the top tier. So we want that bottom tier of self to ideally be bigger than the top tier. In an ideal world, you would be putting more, or at least equal to, but ideally more energy and effort into yourself, because then that's going to give you this solid foundation from which to get more out of work, out of life. Almost think about this as, you know, when they say on the airplane, put your gas mask on before helping somebody else. You need to be in a good place in order to get the more out of work and life. Hope that picture is sort of bringing that to life for you. And what I would say is that when we look at most people's wedding cakes in the care sector, they look a lot more like this. Please tell me, or if you feel comfortable, if this is more similar to what you've drawn on your piece of paper right now. All of that energy, all of that effort is going into work, and 10% is coming back into you and filling up your own cup. And the issue with this is, don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. That's a really interesting phrase. I love that. And the reality is that when we look at people working within care, for so many people and other sectors, but for so many people, their wedding cake would look like this. The effort, the energy is going to work, and very little is coming to themselves. And what is the issue here? If you look at it as a cake, at some point, this cake could collapse or tip over. And so if there's any sort of message that I'd like you to go away with this weekend is, while you're kind of going about probably looking after other people, or, running around, doing whatever you do, start to think, if I had to put this as a percentage, how much is actually coming back to me? And what could I do to give something back to me? Now, don't get me wrong, that could be as simple as having the time to go and read a book for yourself. That could be something that fulfills you outside of work. You could like to bake, and that could be just for you. I went through this exercise with a care company last year, and somebody came back in on the next session and said, I took up golf. And this was a woman. Everyone always thinks it's a man, but there you go. And she said, I've taken up golf because it's the only place I can go where my phone is not with me. Nobody can bother me. My kids can't bother me. And it's for me. It's only for me. And so think about what you can do that can fulfill you, because if you can take the time to get those things in when you can, I guarantee you will be in a better place to get more out of work as a result. So I have run over slightly, but hopefully everyone is still with me. So some key takeaways to take away on the personal well-being side will be, how can you improve confidence and self-esteem? What can you go and do if this is an area that you feel like you need to develop? How can you become more comfortable being assertive? And how can you shape your wedding cake so that it is the correct way round, so that that foundation is going to support you to get more out of work and more out of life as a result? And I'm sure that these are probably 3 areas that when you thought about well-being originally, you probably wouldn't have thought, this is the deep side of it. This is the stuff that's underneath that really is going to have a huge impact on your overall well-being if you can work on these 3 areas. Like I say, there are more. My new venture looks at 10, and I'm going to share some information about that as well in the chat in a second. But please, if anybody has got any questions and you want to pop them in the chat, we can try to answer those. Emily's told me I'm fine for time, so that's good, as long as you are. If you do need to hop off, then we are going to get the recording and we're going to get these resources out to you. But let me just link below. I'm just going to link the wellbeing resources. So I have a link to a free wellbeing policy template, and that will also link. I've just sent that to Emily. Hang on, let's get this out to everybody. I've just got links to the podcast, everything that you could possibly need, so feel free to click through to that if you want to. And also, if you are interested in those 3 areas that I talked about at the end, those 3 well-being areas that are personal well-being areas, and you want to think about the others, or you're curious about what the others are, then I do have a new project, which is we did so well, but no, he started to bark, it's fine. Then I do have a new project where you can actually measure 10 key wellbeing areas and then receive all the development support that you need over the course of 12 months. So it's 12 months access to a wellbeing platform that will support you with that. And I'm going to drop that in there as well, just as a link in case anybody is curious. And like I say, all of that information will come out to you at the very end. But if anybody has any questions, please do let me know. If you'd like to connect with me on any social media, such as LinkedIn, or I've got Twitter up there as well, then please do. Always happy to hear, particularly, if you go and put one of these ideas in place, please do tell me, because I love to hear that if somebody's taken something on board, particularly if they've taken it and then done something even better with it. So do let me know. Thank you very much. So we've come to the end. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here as part of Professional Care Workers Week again this year, and I hope that you've all had a great time celebrating it as well. Really, really important. And yeah, Emily, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'll just echo everyone's thank yous that are coming through now. It's been a really, really great session. Tips on organizational well-being as well as personal, which has been brilliant, and I'm sure very helpful to people. I would highly recommend following Sophie and keeping up to date with what she's doing, because it is brilliant stuff. And thank you for all of you for attending Professional Care Workers Week. I hope it has been good fun, and that you've taken something from it. I know we've had a lot of fun putting it together and hearing all the sessions as well. And we'll be back to do the same thing again next year, hopefully in person next year. But yeah, no, thank you very, very much. And yeah, please do still ask any questions.
Yeah, I know. I always find it's sometimes you get to the end and then people are still here and you think,
you don't want to close everybody off.
Yeah, you don't want to boot everybody out if they're all here. I mean, I can always put some music back on, but I do hope everyone has a nice weekend and goes away and thinks about some of the things perhaps you've heard or seen this week. I know there's been some great debates and other sessions as well.
Yeah, and everything will be recorded as well, so we'll have this on our website in the coming weeks. If anybody missed it as well, or if you want to go back to
that would be great. Yeah, and I will make sure all the links go out to everyone as well. Thanks, Amanda, who's just put in the comments that she's implemented something that I suggested after seeing me at Health Plus Care conference, probably last year or the year before. Yeah, I think that's it. It's about getting out there and learning and taking ideas, and it might not necessarily be ideas from the care sector. The example that I shared about the Swedish company was not a care company, but I heard about it and I thought, that's so good. How can you adapt that for care? And I think there's so many great resources out there for people to go and get ideas to support their teams, especially right now where they're working probably so hard.